evening! I hope you've had a great day today. Welcome to BVJ's Bedtime Stories. I'm Big Voice Jay, and this is a show where we get you ready for a good night's sleep with public domain short stories just for you. Links to all the stories can be found at the show notes at bedtimewithbvj.com. And if you'd like to support the show, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link on every page and post.
Tonight's story: The Adventure of the Three Gables by Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't think that any of my adventures with Mr. Sherlock Holmes opened quite so abruptly or so dramatically as that which I associate with the Three Gables. I don't think that any of my adventures with Mr. Sherlock Holmes opened quite so abruptly or so dramatically as that which I associate with the Three Gables. I had not seen Holmes for some days and had no idea the new channel into which his activities had been directed. He was in a chatty mood that morning, however, and had just settled me into the well-worn low armchair on one side of the fire, while he had curled down with his pipe in his mouth upon the opposite chair, when our visitor arrived. If I had said that a mad bull had arrived, it would give a clearer impression of what occurred. The door had flown open, and a large man had burst into the room. He could have been a cosmic figure if he had not been terrific, for he was dressed in a very loud gray check suit with a flowing salmon-colored tie. His broad face and flattened nose were thrust forward as his sullen dark eyes, with a smoldering gleam of malice in them, turned from one of us to the other. "Which one of you gentlemen is Holmes?" he asked. Holmes raised his pipe with a languid smile. "Oh, it's you, is it?" said our visitor, coming with an unpleasant, stealthy step round the angle of the table. "See here, Holmes, you keep your hands out of other folks' business. Leave folks to manage their own affairs. Got it?" "Keep on talking," said Holmes. "It's fine." "Oh, it's fine, is it?" he said. "It won't be if I have to trim you up a bit. I've handled your kind before now, and they didn't look fine when I was through with them. Look at that, Mr. Holmes." He swung a huge knotted lump of a fist under my friend's nose. Holmes examined it closely with an air of great interest. "Were you born so?" he asked, "or did it come by degrees?" It may have been the icy coolness of my friend, or it may have been the slight clatter which I made as I picked up the poker. In any case, our visitor's manner became less flamboyant. "I've given you fair warning," he said. "I've a friend that's interested out Haraway, you know what I'm meaning. And he doesn't intend to have no button in by you. Got that? You ain't the law, and I ain't the law either, and if you come in, I'll be on hand also. Don't you forget it." "I've wanted to meet you for some time," said Holmes. "I won't ask you to sit down, for I don't like the smell of you, but aren't you Steve Dixie, the bruiser? That's my name, and you'll get put through it for sure if you give me any lip." "It is certainly the last thing you need," said Holmes, staring at our visitor's hideous mouth. "But it was the killing of young Perkins outside the Holborn bar. What, you're not going?" The man had sprung back, and his face was leaden. "I won't listen to no such talk," he said. "What have I to do with this Perkins, Holmes? I was training at the Bull Ring in Birmingham when this boy got into trouble." "Yes, you'll tell the magistrate about it, Steve," said Holmes. "I've been watching you and Barney Stockdale, so help me—" "Holmes, that's enough. Get out of it. I'll pick you up when I want you." "Good morning, Holmes. I hope there isn't any hard feelings about this visit." "There will be, unless you tell me who sent you." "No secret about that, Mr. Holmes. It was the same gentleman that you had just mentioned." "And who sent him on to it?" "I don't know, Holmes. He just said, 'Steve, you go see Mr. Holmes and tell him his life ain't safe if he go down Haraway.' That's the whole truth." Without waiting for any further questioning, our visitor bolted out of the room almost as precipitately as he had entered. Holmes knocked out the ashes of his pipe with a quiet chuckle. I am glad you are not forced to break his head, Watson. I observed your maneuvers with the poker. But he is really a rather harmless fellow. Great, muscular, foolish, blustering baby, and easily cowed, as you have seen. He is one of the Spencer John gang and has taken part in some dirty work of late, which I may clear up when I have some time. His immediate principal, Barney, is a more astute person. They specialize in assaults, intimidation, and the like. What I want to know is, who is at the back of them on this particular occasion? But why do they want to intimidate you? It is this Harrow-Weald case. It decides me to look into the matter, for if it is worth anyone's while to take so much trouble, there must be something in it. But what is it? I was going to tell you when we had this comic interlude. Here's Mrs. Maberley's note. If you care to come with me, we will wire her and go out at once. Dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I read. I have had a succession of strange incidents occur to me in connection with this house, and I should much value your advice. You will find me at home any time tomorrow. The house is within a short walk of the Weald station. I believe that my late husband, Mortimer Maberley, was one of your early clients. Yours faithfully, Mary Maberley. The address was the Three Gables, Harrow-Weald. So that's that, said Holmes. And now, if you can spare the time, Watson, we will get upon our way. A short railway journey and a shorter drive brought us to the house, a brick and timber villa, standing in its own acre of undeveloped grassland. 3 small projections above the upper windows made a feeble attempt to justify its name. Behind was a grove of melancholy, half-grown pines, and the whole aspect of the place was poor and depressing. Nonetheless, we found the house to be well furnished, and the lady who received us was a most engaging elderly person who bore every mask of refinement and culture. I remember your husband well, madam, said Holmes, though it is some years since he used my services in some trifling matter. Probably you would be more familiar with the name of my son, Douglas. Holmes looked at her with great interest. Dear me, are you the mother of Douglas Maberley? I knew him slightly, but of course all London knew him. What a magnificent creature he was! Where is he now? Dead, Mr. Holmes. Dead. He was attaché at Rome, and he died there of pneumonia last month. I am sorry. One could not connect death with such a man. I've never known anyone so vitally alive. He lived intensely, every fiber of him. Too intensely, Mr. Holmes. That was the ruin of him. You remember him as he was, debonair and splendid. You did not see the moody, morose, brooding creature into which he developed. His heart was broken. In a single month, I seemed to see my gallant boy turn into a worn-out, cynical man. A love affair? A woman? Or a fiend? Well, it was not to talk of my poor lad that I asked you to come, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson and I are at your service. There have been some very strange happenings. I've been in this house more than a year now, and as I wish to lead a retired life, I have seen little of my neighbors. 3 days ago, I had a call from a man who said that he was a house agent. He said that this house would exactly suit a client of his, and that if I would part with it, money would be no object. It seemed to me very strange, as there are several empty houses on the market, which appear to be equally eligible, but naturally I was interested in what he said. I therefore named a price which was £500 more than I gave. He at once closed with the offer, but added that his client desired to buy the furniture as well, and would I put a price upon it. Some of this furniture is from my old home, and it is, as you see, very good, so that I named a good round sum. To this, he also at once agreed. I had always wanted to travel, and the bargain was so good that it really seemed that I should be my own mistress for the rest of my life. Yesterday, the man arrived with the agreement all drawn out. Luckily, I showed it to Mr. Sutro, my lawyer, who lives in Harrow. He said to me, "This is a very strange document. Are you aware that if you sign it, you could not legally take anything out of your house, not even your own private possessions?" When the man came again in the evening, I pointed this out, and I said that I meant only to sell the furniture. No, everything," said he. "But my clothes, my jewels." "Well, some concession might be made for your personal effects, but nothing shall go out of this house unchecked. My client is a very liberal man, but he has his fads and his own way of doing things. It is everything or nothing with him." "Then it must be nothing," said I. And there the matter was left, but the whole thing seemed to me to be so unusual that I thought, here we had a very extraordinary interruption. Holmes raised his hand for silence. Then he strode across the room, flung open the door, and dragged in a great gaunt woman whom he had seized by the shoulder. She entered with ungainly struggle like some huge awkward chicken, torn, squawking out of its coop. "Leave me alone! What are you doing?" she screeched. "Why, Susan, what is this?" "Well, I was coming in to ask if the visitors were staying for lunch when this man jumped out at me. I have been listening to her for the last 5 minutes, but did not wish to interrupt your most interesting narrative. Just a little wheezy, Susan, are you not? You breathe too heavily for that kind of work." Susan turned a sulky but amused face upon her captor. "Who are you, and what right have you pulling me about like this?" "It was merely that I wished to ask a question in your presence. Did you, Mrs. Maberley, mention to anyone that you were going to write to me and consult me?" "No, Mr. Holmes, I did not." "Who posted your letter?" "Susan did." "Exactly. Now, Susan, to whom was it that you wrote or sent a message to say that your mistress was asking advice from me?" "It's a lie. I sent no message." "Now, Susan, wheezy people may not live long, you know. It's a wicked thing to tell fibs. Whom did you tell?" "Susan," cried her mistress, "I believe you are a bad, treacherous woman. I remember now that I saw you speaking to someone over the hedge." "That was my own business," said the woman sullenly. "Suppose I tell you that it was Barney Stockdale to whom you spoke," said Holmes. "Well, if you know, what do you want to ask for?" "I was not sure, but I know now." "Well now, Susan, it would be worth £10 to you if you will tell me who was at the back of Barney." "Someone that could lay down £1,000 for every 10 you have in the world." "So, a rich man." "No, you smiled. A rich woman. Now we have got so far, you may as well give the name and earn the tenner." "No, thank you." "Susan, I'm clearing out of here. I've had enough of you all. I'll send for my box tomorrow." She flounced for the door. "Goodbye, Susan. Paregoric is the stuff. Now," he continued, turning suddenly from lively to severe when the door had closed behind the flushed and angry woman, "this gang means business. Look how close they played a game. Your letter to me had the 10 p.m. postmark, and yet Susan passes the word to Barney. Barney has time to go to his employer and get instructions. He or she, I incline to the latter from Susan's grin when she thought I had blundered, forms a plan. Steve is called in, and I am warned off by 11 o'clock next morning. That's quick work, you know. But what do they want?" "Yes, that is the question. Who had the house before you?" "A retired sea captain called Ferguson." "Anything remarkable about him?" "Not that I ever heard of." "I was wondering whether he could have buried something. Of course, when people bury treasure nowadays, they do it in the post office bank, but there are always some lunatics about. It would be a dull world without them. At first, I thought of some buried valuable, but why, in that case, should they want your furniture? You don't happen to have a Raphael or A first folio Shakespeare without knowing it? No, I don't think I have anything rarer than a Crown Derby tea set. That would hardly justify all this mystery. Besides, why should they not openly state what they want? If they covet your tea set, they can surely offer a price for it without buying you out. Lock, stock, and barrel. No, as I read it, there is something which you do not know that you have, and which you would not give up if you did know. That is how I read it, said I. Dr. Watson agrees, so that settles it. Well, Mr. Holmes, what could it be? Let us see whether by this purely mental analysis we can get it to a finer point. You have been in this house a year, nearly 2. All the better. During this long period, no one wants anything from you. Now, suddenly, within 3 or 4 days, you have urgent demands. What would you gather from that? It can only mean, said I, that the object, whatever it may be, has only just come into the house. Settled once again, said Holmes. Now, Mrs. Maberley, has any object just arrived? No, I have bought nothing new this year. Indeed. That is very remarkable. Well, I think we had best let matters develop a little further until we have clearer data. Is that lawyer of yours a capable man? Mr. Sutro is most capable. Have you another maid, or was the fair Susan, who has just banged your front door, alone? I have a young girl. Try and get Sutro to spend a night or 2 in the house. You might possibly want protection. Against whom? Who knows? The matter is certainly obscure. If I can't find what they're after, I must approach the matter from the other end and try to get at the principal. Did this house agent man give any address? Simply his card and occupation, Haynes Johnson, auctioneer and valuer. I don't think we shall find him in the dictionary. Honest businessmen don't conceal their place of business. Well, you will let me know any fresh development. I have taken up your case, and you may rely upon it that I shall see it through. As we passed through the hall, Holmes's eyes, which missed nothing, lighted upon several trunks and cases which were piled in a corner. The labels shone out upon them. Milano, Lucerne. These are from Italy. They are poor Douglas's things. You've not unpacked them. How long have you had them? They arrived last week. But you said, why, surely this must be the missing link. How do we know that there's not something of value there? There could not possibly be, Mr. Holmes. Poor Douglas had only his pay and a small annuity. What could he have of value? Holmes was lost in thought. Delay no longer, Mrs. Maberley, he said at last. Have these things taken upstairs to your bedroom. Examine them as soon as possible and see what they contain. I will come tomorrow and hear your report. It was quite evident that the Three Gables was under very close surveillance, for as we came round the high hedge at the end of the lane, there was the prize-fighter standing in the shadow. We came on him quite suddenly, and a grim and menacing figure he looked in that lonely place. Holmes clapped his hand to his pocket. Looking for your gun, Mr. Holmes? No, for my scent bottle, Steve. You are funny, Mr. Holmes, aren't you? It won't be funny for you, Steve, if I get after you. I gave you fair warning this morning. Well, Holmes, I thought over what you said, and I want no more talk about this affair of Mr. Perkins. Suppose I can help you, Mr. Holmes, I will. Well then, tell me who's behind you on this job. Mr. Holmes, I told you the truth before. I don't know. My boss Barney gave me the orders, and that's all. Well, just bear in mind, Steve, that the lady in that house and everything under that roof is under my protection. Don't forget it. All right, Holmes, I'll remember. I've got him thoroughly frightened for his own skin, Watson, Holmes remarked as we walked on. I think he would double-cross his employer if he knew who he was. It was lucky I had some knowledge of the Spencer John crowd, and that Steve was one of them. Now, Watson, this is a case for Langdale Pike, and I'm going to see him now. When I get back, I may be clearer in the matter. I saw no more of Holmes during the day, but I could well imagine how he spent it, for Langdale Pike was his human book of reference upon all matters of social scandal. This strange, languid creature spent his waking hours in the bow window of a St. James Street club, and was the receiving station as well as the transmitter for all the gossip in the metropolis. He made, it was said, a 4-figure income by the paragraphs which he contributed every week to the garbage papers which catered to an inquisitive public. If ever, far down in the turbid depths of London life, there was some strange swirl or eddy, it was marked with automatic exactness by this human dial upon the surface. Holmes discreetly helped Langdale to knowledge, and an occasion was helped in turn. When I met my friend in his room early next morning, I was conscious from his bearing that all was well, but nonetheless a most unpleasant surprise was awaiting us. It took the shape of the following telegram. Please come out at once. Client's house burgled in the night. Police in possession. Sutro. Holmes whistled. The drama has come to a crisis, and quicker than I had expected. There is a great driving power at the back of this business, Watson, which does not surprise me after what I have heard. This Sutro, of course, is her lawyer. I made a mistake, I fear, in not asking you to spend the night on guard. This fellow has clearly proved a broken reed. Well, there is nothing for it but another journey to Harrow Weald. We'll continue our story on our next episode. We are always on the hunt for great stories like these to feature on the show. You can send your suggestions to bigvoicej@gmail.com. We've got a YouTube channel full of stories from the show. Go to tiny.cc/BVJ Bedtime. If you found some value in our storytelling tonight, don't forget to show the love. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link on every post. Thank you so much for listening. Good night.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.